Okay, I see more people joining. Let's wait another second, and in the meantime, I'll start giving you some information about the technology so we can go faster as soon as we have more people joining. So first of all, welcome and thank you for being here to this 5th episode of the CEMS webinar series, Voice Tech. And thank you, Blandine, for being here.
Pleasure.
Some technical information. We are going to start the webinar and have the Q&A at the end. You can ask questions through the Q&A window, and then we're going to answer to them at the very end. The webinar is going to last around 1 hour, and then you're going to receive the recording, which is going to be posted on YouTube as well. So you can rewatch it there and share it if there is some content you like. We're also going to share a feedback survey. So at the end, you can also give us some recommendations for how to improve the format of the webinars, and to also give us some more ideas on the next speakers you would like to hear from. And now I'm really glad to introduce you to Blandine. Blandine is a CEMS alumna. She graduated from HEC in 2007. She started her career in the tech industry in France, and then she started to work in marketing, first for B2C in Paris, and then she moved to London for B2B. Then she became at Tech Senior Product Marketing Manager for Solocal. And at the end of 2018, she moved to San Francisco to pursue her passion in technology, and she joined Dashbot, which is a startup that focuses on conversational analytics. I'll now leave the floor to Blandine. Thank you so much again for joining, and I hope you enjoyed the webinar.
Thank you, Elisa, for the introduction, and hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today. As Elisa said, it's morning here in San Francisco, so thank you for all of you who are joining late evening after work. I really appreciate that you found the topic interesting and decided to join. Thank you very much. So just before we start, as Elisa said, my background is definitely not technical. I'm a pure business background in terms of studies. As well, my career was really focused on marketing, but I'm definitely a tech enthusiast. So today will be much more focused on what voice can bring to business, but I will touch on some technical notions. So you'll understand better how it works behind the scenes, and you can also have like quite fancy conversations with anyone on voice tech with those technical terms that are always good to know about. So that's just the little introduction about me. And about the agenda for today, I suggest that we first start exploring what makes voice so special and why is it so special right now. Then we'll move on to another section in which I want to share with you why I think, and lots of voice professionals think, that voice can really change the game for brands. And after that, I want to give you some real life examples, because some brands are already doing a really good job at leveraging voice for business. And finally, I will share some tips and resources. If after this chat, or maybe even before this chat, some of you were interested in joining the voice industry, then well, I'm happy to share the few tips I have for you to make it easier. So without further ado, let's have a look at voice, and especially let's try to understand why voice tech is so exciting right now. So first off, voice is actually really natural for humans. We don't really think that about like the way we speak. We just speak, just like fish swim in water and they don't really think about water. We just speak to, like, talk to another, have conversations, and we don't really take time to take a step back, because it's just the way we do communicate. And actually it's such an important thing for humans that our brain processes voice in a different way than any other sound. you can easily ignore other sounds. Just think like when you're working, you don't really get distracted by other types of sound. But if you hear a voice, your brain will actually focus, because that's something specific that the brain is really keen to deal with in a really specific manner. And the best example is that from the first day you're born, the way for babies to know their mothers when they don't even really see well is from her voice. So voice has been something so important for human since day one. And everyone has the ability to learn how to speak, to learn language. Learning how to write, learning numbers is much more difficult. Most of us go to school to learn that, and it's not easy. But kids just learn how to speak by hearing their parents and anyone around them, and they pick it up, and they end up being able to speak and to master language. So that's really something natural. And not something that you need to learn. And I'll come to that later, but I was very surprised when I gave an Echo Dot to my parents. They could just use it straight away. Then how to use the smartphone, even though I thought it was quite straightforward. For them, it was really hard. But when I gave them Alexa, they were just like, yeah, we're just asking Alexa. And that was just natural. So that's really something different and a new paradigm in technology already. The other thing about voice is that voice is actually a very specific activity for humans. We just don't speak to speak or to give facts. For example, animals have sorts of languages, but it's very functional. It's just a way for them to alert their peers about a danger or where food is. Humans actually use language mainly to convey social information, to build communities, to collaborate, and that's really what makes language something very powerful. And that's also the reason why the brain is treating it in a different way, because we just don't throw words just to throw words, we throw words to make something happen. So as soon as you hear voice, you know that there's a collaboration on the way, and the brain is getting attentive to actually process the information in a specific way. And as a consequence, that's something really interesting. Our brain is wired for shortcuts, because we can't really process all the information we get about everything. So we have a lot of ways to take shortcuts from the information we get. And with voice, your brain actually automatically map a voice to a gender and to a personality. So if you hear a voice, you know it's even if you don't see the person, just think about last time, for example, you called the customer service and talk to someone you've never met and you've never seen for real, yet you build a picture of this person in your head, and you just, your brain builds this picture of a woman or a man, and of an extrovert or an introvert, of someone very outgoing or someone a bit shy. So it's pretty interesting how your brain does the shortcuts, and just from the voice anticipates the relationship that you can have with this person. And what's astonishing is that it also happens with synthetic voices. So that's why there are lots of discussions around should the voice of your smart speaker be a woman or a man, how it should sound, because actually your brain will associate something directly with that voice. So when I started in the industry, I found those two things really fascinating, because it's so different from having to learn how to code or even like how to process a user interface on a screen. So that's really the foundation I wanted to share before digging more onto voice tech. And something that makes it so exciting right now is that voice is starting to work really well. It's not a new thing. For some reason, humans have always envisioned talking to machines. I've put a screenshot here of Stanley Kubrick's movie 2001 Space Odyssey. It dates back to 1968, and already in that movie, there's like a proper character that is HAL, H-A-L. It's that computer, and yeah, the astronauts are talking to him, and there's an interaction, and HAL is actually really powerful. So it's not something new. It's not a new dream to have natural interactions with machines, but so far it was a bit clunky, not really working well. But now with all the computer capacities that have been increased with AI and machine learning, especially something called NLP or NLU, and I will detail that in the next slide. It stands for Natural Language Processing and Natural Language Understanding, and also a lot of user research in order to really make the conversation as natural as it would be with a real human. So obviously it took a bit of time to happen in terms of tech, but today tech is mature. And for those of you who have tried to use their voice assistants either on their smartphone or on smart speaker, it's getting much, much better. So how does it work behind the scenes? Natural language processing has a few key notions that are good to know, and that will help you understand how it works and what actually brands can do with it in the grand scheme of things. So basically the conversation is broken down by utterances. So let's say a utterance is each turn of the conversation. In order to start the conversation, you have to wake up your assistant. I took here the example of, and I have to turn it off because it's gonna disturb us. Let me just turn it off. Alexa. So when you say Alexa, the smart speaker starts listening to you. Then to use a specific application, so in this example, the Domino's Pizza ordering app, you have to say the name, just like the way you would enter the URL for a website. And it's called an invocation name. So that's a powerful choice that brands have to make when starting to develop on voice, because that's how the app is going to be found. Then the other important thing is the concept of intent. So intent is basically an intent, so the purpose of the utterance. As I said before, language is an intentional activity. So every turn of the conversation actually has a purpose. So here, the purpose is to place an order. And well, usually the smart speaker, well, the voice assistant gives some hints to help the conversation move forward, because it's not easy to, well, the possibilities are completely endless. So it can be hard for the user to know what to ask for and to actually keep the user in the, well, what the app can do. So that's why the previous one is offering a choice between placing an order or tracking an order. So the user expresses the intent clearly that he or she wants to place an order, and helps the conversation move forward. And the last concept that will be helpful for you to understand is the concept of slot or entity, depending on which platform you're using. But it's basically the characteristic of the intent. So we know this user wants to order pizza. Now we need to know what type of pizza. So here again, the smart speaker is giving some hints about the size, and that user is actually answering with the slot that needs to be fulfilled. So regular size pizza. And basically that's how it works when you talk to any voice assistant, breaking down the conversation in these different concepts, and that's how as well brands can think about how to build a conversation and actually make action happen between the brand and the user. So that's pretty much as technical as I will go. So don't worry, it's not gonna be more painful. The other reason why I'm really excited about voice right now is that consumer adoption is really, really on the rise. It's really there. So I'm sharing a few figures here. And apologies that most of the figures are actually from the US for some reason, well, for different reasons. First off is that the market is more mature here. So there are more studies here as well. And I guess it's always a good way to anticipate what is going to spread to the rest of the world as well. So apologies that I don't have more figures about other parts of the world, because I know everyone, well, it's the CEMS community is a very international one, but I think that's going to still give us some good understanding of where voice is going. So in 2019, so just last year, 1/3 of Americans actually use the voice assistant at least monthly on any device. So any device can be on your smartphone, can be on smart speakers, or even in your car. And what I find really interesting is that it's really a habit that is that's really becoming a habit. This use is monthly, so it's not just like I'm trying and yeah, well, whatever. I'm really doing it like on a consistent basis. And for 1/3 of the population, it's pretty big. And actually, Canalys has forecasted that in 2021, there will be more smart speakers than tablets. So it's not just a fad, it's really here to stay and to get really mainstream. And finally, I want to quote this from Business Insider, because it's really astonishing. So 5 years since the first device in its category was launched, the smart speaker may be demonstrating one of the fastest rates of consumer adoption of any technology device in history, outpacing even the smartphone. And to me, who kind of started my career when the first iPhone was launched and seeing like how fast the smartphone got mainstream, hearing that voice and smart speakers are actually outpacing that, I find it pretty crazy. And actually, I have a great graph to back this up. So you can see this this graph is showing how long it took for each type of technology to spread to the population. So at the bottom is the number of years since the first introduction on the American market, and on the vertical, it shows the percentage of the population actually equipped. So as you can see, smart speaker is like so much faster than any of them. And well, it means that it's becoming really mainstream and it can't be ignored by brands. And I'm gonna come to more details about that in the next few slides. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the landscape of voice assistants here. And apologies to everyone interested in Asia. I have a huge blind spot about Asia and China. China is actually a big market with local players like Alibaba, but unfortunately, I'm really not knowledgeable about it. I can't read Mandarin, so I don't know much about it. So rather than saying like things that I don't know, I'm just being honest. And if any one of you is interested in digging that, I'd be happy to help and give some sources. But what I'm offering to share today is more like the Western landscape. So there are 5 main players. So big names, you can easily recognize them from like the top players in the tech scene across all tech fields actually, with Google that has the Google Assistant, Apple with Siri, Microsoft with Cortana, Amazon with Alexa, and Samsung with Bixby. And as you can see, they're really spreading out pretty quickly, using mainly devices to enter the market. As you can see, Google already have over 1 billion voice assistants on devices, and pretty much half those devices are being used by their users, because there are 500 million monthly average users for Google Assistant, and other players have pretty big numbers to show as well. Just one note about Bixby from Samsung. It just came much later than the others, so that must be why the monthly average users are a bit fewer, like a lot fewer than the others, but they're pushing a lot. So we might see Samsung catch up pretty quickly. And something really interesting as well is how global these user assistants are now. They started mainly in English, because it's basically every time you start a new language, it's just like starting from scratch, because every language has a very specific structure, and you just have to redo it from top to bottom, from bottom to top, well, from scratch. So it's really great to see that most countries now have access to voice assistants, and that lots of languages are now being covered by those voice assistants, especially Google and Apple that have a lot of languages already supported. Just one quick note on the multilingual option that Amazon Alexa offers. It's something pretty cool. So basically they, well, at Amazon, they realized that quite a lot of households actually have two languages in the household, and they switch from one to another. So for example, in the US, there are lots of Spanish speakers, and at home they will just like switch from Spanish to English. Myself, I switch from French to English, and they have recently enabled Alexa to speak two different languages. So that's pretty cool as well. So that's the current, let's say, Western landscape, even though Samsung is Korean and really big in Asia. I'm just missing the Chinese landscape here. So let's carry on. The other reason why this technology is also being adopted pretty quickly is because these big players that we've just seen on the previous slide have a lot of money. So they are not afraid to spend a lot on advertising and really target the mass market. So I pasted a screenshot here from the Great British Bake Off. For those living in the UK, it's a TV show that lots of people watch. So that's definitely the type of communication they will push. They're also really big on, for example, the Super Bowl here in the US. The Super Bowl is definitely the biggest sports event on the American TV, and like a 30-second ad can cost up to 5 million. But both this year, both Alexa and Google Assistant were there, and actually last year, the Alexa ad from the Super Bowl was the most viewed ad on YouTube, with over 19.5 billion views. So they are really investing a lot on awareness and making sure everyone knows about it, and well, then wants to use it. And their ads are always really nice, and they show you how you can use the technology on a daily basis, how helpful it can be for everybody. So that's proving really efficient. The other thing they do is just give away the devices. So first off, the smart speakers are pretty cheap, but Google, for example, has been giving away quite a few. Last year, they just gave a device to all the people who went to a basketball game here in San Francisco, one of the Warriors game. Everyone, they gave out 10,000 smart speakers, so everyone could try, and yeah, just creating the first try, and then creating good content, and we'll come to that, to make sure the users are keep coming back, and adoption is just becoming part of everyone's day-to-day life. So content indeed, just like the web, a web with no websites wouldn't be really interesting. Same with voice. Content is still king, and in order to have users use those voice assistants, you need good content. That's why the strategy by all the players is to offer, except Apple actually, only Apple doesn't let developers freely build stuff for Siri, but Google, Amazon, and then other platforms like IBM give some really great tools that are free for developers. And like, I managed to do a few things as well, even though I'm not super techy, but really the idea is to generate user content and brand content, really encouraging anyone who wants to build a new experience on voice to do it. There's also a very rich ecosystem of additional tools. So lots of startups have started offering what's called conversation builders tool. So to help brands, but also anyone who wants to do it, to build an experience that works and test beyond the code, but like really the user experience on voice. And lots of these tools are freemium. So I've put a list of them at the end of the presentation. If you want to give them a try, it's pretty fun. And finally, even for non-tech users like me, both Amazon and Google have released what they call blueprints for Amazon and templates for Google. So all the same, I've put the URL at the end of the presentation. You can go there and basically build some custom-made skills for your voice assistant. So for example, if you go onto the Amazon Alexa blueprint, you can build a specific skill for if you're renting your house through Airbnb, then you can have a greeting from Alexa for your guests and explain the house rules and where's what, etc. And that's just super easy. You just enter the information and the whole tech is executed by Amazon. You can do the same for your babysitter, for your dog sitter. You can also like have fun things like reminding everyone in the household when it's his or her turn to wash the dishes or take the trash out. So lots of things just to make it not only fun but useful for users to really well, start using voice instead of paper notes or emails or messages. And I really encourage you to try those things if you've got a smart speaker at home, because it's fun and pretty useful. So coming on to user behavior, it's not only fun stuff, not only my small cousins asking Alexa to fart, or as I said, having a list of whose turn it is to do the dishes, but there's actually pretty big business potential. So here's a forecast by OCNC. So in 2022, so just like 2 years from now, they estimate that users will actually spend 40 billion in the US and 5 billion in the UK through voice. And I've got among the examples that I'm going to share in a little bit, there are some brands that are actually really making some great money. So it's really becoming an additional channel for brands that has to be considered, and that is going to grow so fast and can't be ignored anymore. And among the shoppers that are using voice, they're actually doing a lot of stuff, lots of research. So that's another interesting thing. And brands have to make sure that actually they're enabling voice research, and they're making sure that it's easy to do it, and giving a good picture of what the brand is doing. Lots of, let's say, process tracking as well, like tracking a package, contacting support, reordering items. So that kind of things can also be really useful for brands to offload maybe customer service. And I'll have an example about that later on. And already 22% are making a new purchase through voice. So it's not just for fun, it's really for business right now. And that's what I want to dig in the next section, really dig more about what it means for brands and what brands should start thinking about around voice, because they shouldn't wait anymore. So as I just said, it's definitely a new channel, and it has to be considered as in the go-to-market strategies. Currently, only about 22% of companies have released the voice app, so it leaves about almost 80% of the companies that have not done anything yet and should really really jump on the train. Good news is most companies, well, still have understood it. So 90% are already making significant investment in voice. So that's a very growing field of expertise that is important in companies. And 66% believe that it's going to drive conversion and increase revenues. So yeah, as I said, it's going to be a growing department or cross organizational skill that is going to get bigger in companies. And even for user experience, and I have a few words about that later, well, 71% of companies think that voice can really help improve user experience. No question, it really has to be like, if you work for a brand that has not yet considered voice, I think you should start talking about it. One field that I really see as a great opportunity is to actually strengthen the customer relationship and deepen the customer relationship. First of all, voice is an amazing way to actually grab a new share of attention with end users, because well, we know everyone spends a lot of time looking at screens, but with voice you can actually grab the time when users are not looking at screens, either at home or in their car or on the go. I read that Americans spend about 200 hours a year in their car, so commuting. So using voice in the car could be a great way to actually enter that time of the day when end users are not on the screen. At home, well, right now I'm hosting you in my kitchen, because that's where I've put my, well, some of my smart speakers. I have some in other rooms as well, but I don't have any screen in my kitchen. And yes, I've got my smart speakers, and I use them when I cook because my hands are busy. So it's a really great, like, it's a new, well, the pie has grown with the attention share pie has grown with voice. Voice assistants also, they can be really personable, because you can really craft it with a voice that can become your brand ambassador. So as I said at the beginning, anytime you hear a voice, you associate something with it. You associate a type of personality. And it's hard to, it's sometimes, well, you can convey that through a screen with like nice pictures that are really showing what your brand identity is, but you can also do that with voice. Especially now, there's a new service that has just been launched by Amazon that is called Poly, which enables you to really craft like a voice that really tick the boxes for what you want it to sound like. It's not just the standard Alexa voice, it's a voice that you can really personalize and really make stick to your brand identity. Right now, one of the first brands to use it is KFC Canada. So they basically crafted a voice that sounds like the Colonel, so with a Southern accent, and well, that makes it really, really personable. And anytime a user will be interacting with it, it really sounds like KFC. So any brand can play around with that and really feel like a more human relation with their customers. And finally, one thing that is absolutely amazing with voice is that because you have immediate feedback, because it's a conversation. So if your smart speaker offer you something, for example, a promotion about something, and you're not interested, you're gonna say, no, that's not interesting to me. So you can learn from that and refine it, and next time offer a promotion that will be more interesting for the customer. So it's a great way to come up with very, very personalized messages and really strengthen the customer relationship. And instead of being intrusive, really be there when the customer needs you with the right right content. So I'm really excited about this customer relationship side of voice. Just a little quick look at something just a tiny bit technical. So it's not a design class. I have no, I'm not a designer by any means, but something that all brands have to keep in mind is that you can't just copy paste what you've got on your website onto voice. It's not gonna work. It requires to completely shift the design mentality, and in the references I've put a really great book if you're interested in that. It's really fascinating. But basically you can't move from GUI, so graphic user interface, to VUI, voice user interface, just by copy pasting, because it's just a different interaction. So it really requires new skills and a new way to think about it. The reasons are, when you design something on a screen, the information is static. It's all delivered in one piece. Your users are going onto your website and you can put all the information there. And you don't have to react in real time to what the user is reading. When you're using voice, then it's a flow of information. And depending on the reaction of your user, you have to adjust and really timely deliver what the user needs to know at the right time. Also, the journey on the screen is up to the user. You can scroll down, scroll up, click this link, click that link. There's no control onto in which order the user is looking at your page. When you are using voice, you need to make sure the conversation keeps progressing, doesn't get stuck. That's why in the example I gave with the Domino's Pizza app, I put a lot of props, and that's actually the real interaction. Props really help the user know what to ask and keep going on. So it's really something you have to be intentional. Otherwise, the user might not know what to ask, or might ask things that you actually can't manage, and that's just going to be frustrating. So that's why those conversation building tools are really useful to test and to know what to answer when the user is not going to ask something you can deal with, or just getting stuck somehow. And last thing, when you design your website, you put all the information there, and once it's online, it's kind of up to the user to understand what you've written there. It's like the responsibility of the user to read it through and to understand it. It's very different when it comes to conversation, because as I said, talking to a robot, a smart speaker, in your brain is just like talking to a human, because our brain is just wired for that. Maybe it's going to evolve in a few centuries, but for now, that's how the human brain is processing voice. Then the responsibility of the conversation is actually shared between the user and the smart speaker. So it's really interesting to make sure that the voice assistant will be treating the user with respect and help this common understanding in the conversation. So bottom line, you just can copy paste your website onto voice. It's not gonna work. And you may need some experts and professionals of conversation design, of natural language processing to make it work. And finally, it's time to rethink SEO. Comscore had forecasted that by 2020, half of searches will be done on voice. So we are a little bit below that today, but 2020 just started. But definitely more and more users are using voice to search. It's really convenient. But when you search with voice, you don't get the same results as those you get on Google on your screen. Actually, voice assistants only give you the top 3 results. So if you're not there, you're just not there and no one knows about you. And I did the test with, actually I can do the test later. Because the other way, the other thing that has to be remembered is that users will ask questions very differently when speaking than when writing it. So for example, if I want to find a florist next to me, I'm just gonna type florist onto Google and I will look at the map and I will most probably take the one that is closer to me. But with a voice assistant, it's gonna be an experience more like the following. Hey Google, I want to buy flowers for my mom.
I found a few florists near you. The first one is Farm Girl Flowers at 901 16th Street, San Francisco. The second one is Petals a Flower Studio at 365 West Portal Avenue, San Francisco. The third one is San Francisco Florist at 188 Spear Street, number 160, San Francisco.
So I've asked the question in a much more elaborate way, let's say. So that's really, there has to be a focus on long tail words, even more than online. And also, as you could hear, there were only 3 florists. They're actually really not close to me. There are some of them really close, but those ones are like on the other side of the city. So that's a bit of a shame that local businesses haven't looked at that already to make it work best. The good news is there are some tools, some types of snippets to help brands optimize their websites for voice search. So that's definitely something I encourage any company to have a look at. So before we're getting close to the end, but I really want to share 4 examples with you because to me they are really, really groundbreaking examples. The first one is Starbucks. So Starbucks was a very early player. Early 2017, they launched a skill in the US that enabled regular customers to reorder their favorite cup of coffee. The idea was really to help them save time because they were coming to Starbucks every day and just making the purchase experience smoother and quicker was the actual goal, and that proved really, really successful. Last year, for the first 10 months of 2019, this skill generated 1.4 million revenues. So it's really working. So they're not stopping here. They're expanding across the world. They were the first retailer to launch on Bixby in South Korea, so the Samsung version in 2018. So a big move for the Korean market. And they also launched last year on the Alibaba's voice assistant. So they're really, really going all out with voice. They really consider it as a proper sales channel, and well, it's generating revenues. So that's a great example of what voice can do to brands in terms of business. My second example is a pretty cool one as well by Nike. Nike was actually the first brand to use voice for promotions. So last year, almost exactly a year ago, they launched a pretty futuristic, really cool pair of sneakers that actually self-lace. So it's kind of like Back to the Future type of shoes. So they made it like really, really special in terms of launch. They decided to launch at halftime during a basketball game. And basically, the only way to buy the shoes at the time was to buy it through voice. So that was the first ever real-time voice activated sale, and it was a massive success. So the shoes were pretty expensive, as you can imagine, that type of like really innovative shoes. Each pair was $350, and yet in just 6 minutes, they were all gone. So I think that's a pretty cool example of a way to create buzz around a product launch. And actually, Nike won a Cannes Lions for this campaign because it was so groundbreaking. My fourth example is on customer experience, and it's by Activision on their Call of Duty game. So they are using Alexa in order to help users play better. They give them recommendations, they give them hints on how to get more points, and they also make it kind of like social, so you can compare your performance to your friends and thus be willing to play more because you want to beat your friends. In the resources, I've put the links to the videos where they show how it works, and it's really pretty cool. I didn't find any figures on that, but definitely it really builds loyalty for players, and users play more, they play better, they buy more add-on, and it's just a very virtuous circle in terms of user experience. My last example is from German insurance company, and apologies to all the German speakers here. My German is really rusty. So Versicherungskammer Bayern. What they realized is that voice could really help offload their customer service, because customer service reps tend to have to answer the same questions over and over again, and it's not really bringing that much value in terms of their job and in terms of what they deliver to the customers. So they decided to automate the most common questions that the sales rep gets. So questions around the features of your insurance policy, all the frequent asked questions, and even like personal information on your insurance policy, like for example, like all the numbers that you want to know before making a claim. So this was implemented and really worked well. They reported a substantial reduction in the volume of calls to customer service. So then the customer service rep can actually focus on more valuable questions, more complicated questions that require a human. Because, well, at some point there will always be the need for humans. I don't think we can 100% automate customer service, for example, but I think it's better for everyone, and especially for the reps, to have a higher value in the interactions with the customers. So that's another really cool example of a way to improve your customer service through voice. And before we leave the floor to questions, just a quick few tips. So if some of you are willing to join the voice industry, I have just 4 quick tips. First of all, just experiment as much as you can as a user. You can do it on your phone, you can get a smart speaker and just try stuff. That's fun, and that gives you more knowledge. So just have fun with that. Also read or listen as much as you can on topics that are connected with voice. I've got a full list of websites and podcasts and Twitter accounts that you can have a look at. The community, it's still quite a new community, and everyone is really keen to share. So there's a lot of resources out there, and that's a great spirit, and you should definitely make the most of it. Also try to build your own voice killer actions. So for those of you who are not really techie, the blueprint and the templates are really easy to do. I did my own stuff as well, and that's fun. It's not too hard, and if you feel more adventurous, you can try to do a little bit of coding. I did a bit on, you don't need to be like super good. There are lots of tutorials online as well. You can use IBM Watson that has a great program to help you get on board. Also, Dialogflow by Google is kind of doable. So I really encourage you to try your own stuff, and that really gives you legitimacy on the field. And finally, there are a lot of voice communities kind of all over the world. Some are actually physical. Here in the US, there are quite a few. I know that in Paris, in Madrid, there are also some a really great community that is called Women in Voice. But because it's a big international community, there are lots of online communities actually that are connected through Slack. So I've put the references in the next few slides as well if you're interested in joining them, and you get like top-notch engineers and voice designers who are keen to share what they're working on, answer questions. They're also sharing jobs, so that can be a really cool thing if you're interested. So that's just on the next two slides that are right there. And now I think we can open the floor to questions.
Thank you so much, Blandine, for your talk. It was super interesting. We have some questions. I'll start with the first one. Do you think that Google will remain on top over the next 5 years?
So there's a massive battle between Google and Amazon. I think Amazon is trying to match Google, and it's going to be an ongoing war, I would say. For now, Google is, I think Google, because of the devices that they are already spreading all over the smartphones and the computers, that give them a bit of an edge because their assistant is there already. However, Amazon is also playing quite well, and they're getting more and more equipped in cars. Lots of car manufacturers are actually putting Amazon on board. So I would say that's going to be a great battle to watch. Well, it's always good when there's competition. So hopefully Google will be a little bit chased by Amazon and maybe others. Maybe, as I said, Amazon is a little bit new, but they've got huge potential just as Google. So it's going to be interesting to watch.
Thank you so much. So our next question is, what are the top 3 challenges for voice tech from your experience?
I think one is privacy. Unfortunately, there has been a few controversies and a few scandals actually around privacy, and definitely the big players I alluded to have to build trust again for the users, and that's definitely a concern for all end users, and also brands can have to know how to deal with that, especially if you're asking for personal information. That's really something that can get tricky. So my top one would be privacy. My second point is really still working on biases. That's something actually that happened in all technologies, but if you use voice assistants, they are usually a female voice that is a bit submissive. For some reason, they understand better male voices than female voices, and that's all biases because the engineers who are working on it are usually white male. The good thing is, because the voice community is new and pretty diverse, and voice has big opportunities as well for a lot of people with disabilities, and so there's a real awareness and a real will to fight those biases. I've got a great article I can share with you guys as well on that. But it's definitely a challenge because tech today is mainly white male dominated. And the third one to me would still be to make sure you deliver a great experience. It's still a new field, so there's still a lot to learn, both on the NLP side, on the conversation design side, and it's a lot of trial and error, a lot of experimenting for brands. So brands shouldn't get disappointed if the first release is not perfect. It's really an ongoing job, and that's a bit of a challenge because it requires resources and a team that really maintains the conversation, the skill up to the best level. But to me, this third challenge is more like a learning curve than an actual challenge.
Perfect, thanks. We now have questions related more to the company side. So first, why is voice tech only used 22% in companies, in your opinion?
I think it's just because it's new, and companies are always a bit wary at first. They just want to make sure it's not just a fad, and they don't want to invest in like in a couple of months, then no one cares about voice anymore. So I guess these 20% of companies that invested were early adopters, really convinced that voice could bring something to their brand, while the others were looking at what these 20% were doing and waiting to see if it was actually a real business opportunity. But the other figures are showing that most companies have actually realized that it's a real business opportunity and they need to invest in it. So I think it's just like the normal adoption curve that is at play here.
Perfect. We have another question related to businesses. It says, if I look at some reports like Euromonitor's digital commerce report, they claim that voice will only count something like 3% of total e-commerce in Germany and the UK by 2023.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
In China.
Sorry, you first for a second. Well, actually, 3 to 5% of e-commerce is already pretty big if you look at the figures, because e-commerce is huge, and it's only 2023, which is just 2 years away from here. So if you look back at e-commerce by itself in the early days of the internet, or even when smartphones started and people were really dubious as well about the business potential on smartphone, but now we all like buy stuff through our smartphones. I think if your monitor is not missing anything, it's just going to be the pace of it. But to me, like, it's already really big in just a couple of years to reach 3 to 5% of the whole e-commerce market. If the question is more why only 3% in Germany and the UK versus 4 to 5% in the US and China, I think it's just, here again, it's just a matter of timeline, because the US started a little bit earlier. Once again, I'm definitely not a specialist about China, but I know the big players in China like Alibaba have huge install base. So I think it's just that US and China got a head start, and Europe, including Germany and the UK and other countries, are just catching up, and there will just be like a delay in terms of figures, but eventually it's gonna catch up just the way the internet and smartphones and all those tech did catch up as well.
Perfect, thanks. I also have a question in these regards. We were mentioning a lot about voice tech and companies having to adopt voice technology, but I was also thinking about chatbots. What do you think is the difference, and what companies are implementing first, and what should be the priority?
That's a great question. Actually, at Dashbot, analytics is also on chatbots. I've been exposed to chatbots as well. They are actually complementary. You won't reach, well, chatbots are still mainly on screens as well. So you won't be reaching your users at the same time. As I said, with voice, you're just reaching new times and new usages. Chatbots are more an alternative to your usual website, and the main application that we see with chatbot is around customer service, actually. That's really a great way to offer the customer service, from mundane questions that are that are just like actually somewhere on the website, but the users can't be bothered to go and find it. I would say chatbots are really a great tool to automate what has kind of low value in terms of customer interaction. Whereas if you can do that with voice as well, voice has an additional layer of relationship in terms of really creating a persona for your brand and really entering the intimacy of the customer through voice. But I would definitely advise any company to do both.
Thank you. We have a question related to emotions. Are emotions taken into account when addressing requests?
That's a great question. So the answer is not yet, but all those big players I mentioned before are working on it, because it's something that would definitely help make the conversation better. One thing, for example, that voice assistants are not really understanding is humor. And like if you're making a joke, but like it's just gonna be understood as is. They don't understand, and like you can say the same sentence with a different tone and it can mean something completely different. All the same, the way you answer a question can be really positive or really negative depending on the tone. And right now the technology is not there yet, but all the engineers know that it's the next step and they're working on it. I don't know how exactly, because once again I'm not a technical person, but hopefully it's gonna come in the next few years and it's gonna improve the experience a lot.
Great. Still related to the topic, addressing requests usually doesn't take social codes into account. For example, no please, no thank you. Is this taken into account by companies?
That's another great question. And actually, I read a really interesting article that I can share as well around that generation of kids that are growing up with smart speakers and are just getting used not to say please or thank you. So that's definitely interesting in terms of how we are interacting with technology, and because that technology is close to how we interact as humans, it could kind of change the rules. All the best practices I could read around that is that you can't expect much from the user. You can't expect the user to say thank you. And actually, Alexa is not waiting for me to say thank you to finish the conversation when Alexa has answered my question. However, all the conversation you are designing on the brand side has to take into account the social codes. That can be different in different cultures as well. But that's definitely something you need to make part of the conversation as a brand. And I think some skills that are more like games for kids, not really like business skills for companies, but more on the kids and gaming side, they do ask for please and thank yous before moving on to the conversation. So that's definitely something that can be implemented and taken into account, and I would say on a granular level in terms of different cultures.
Perfect. We have a final question. Would you agree with the assessment that shifting to voice requires more precisely mapping the customer journey?
Definitely, and I think it's like the first thing any company has to do is to map the customer journey in order to understand where voice brings value. Because if you want your customer to use it, it's just not voice for voice. It has to satisfy some kind of need and satisfy it better than a screen or a phone call to the company, or even like a visit in store. So that's definitely the first thing to do before actually developing voice. And once you know what you want to do for voice, what business need, what type of interaction you want to implement, then you have to break it down as well at that level in order to make the conversation effective. So that's definitely the right way to approach it.
Good. We're leaving the floor for some final questions. In the meantime, I also have a question for you more related to your career path. Since we are doing this webinar during Alumni Week, the Global Alumni, I would like to know a little bit more about how do you think, with a business background as you, but also as CEMSs, how is it possible to enter the tech industry, and what are the main roles that we can aim to?
So first of all tech companies need business people as well. The engineers are there to do the hardcore tech job, but they also need people with business backgrounds to put the products to market, to work on communications, like anything that we have learned at school, basically. But obviously, being interested in tech helps. So actually, my interest in tech started in telecom. I mentioned that actually my first job was with Orange, the telecom company, when the iPhone was launching, and that's how I started to be like really into trying new devices. And then from phones, and there were the connected watches, and like it just snowballed into becoming quite an early adopter of tech. Just as an end user first, and actually for the past few years I started to try basic skills in coding, just because I kind of like to understand how it works behind the scene, and I like to build new stuff. So to me, if you want to come into tech, it's better if you've got some kind of interest for it, and if you try to build your own stuff. So I'm not to the stage where I have my GitHub that I can show to potential employers, but definitely if you want to go all the way to that, and you've got like a small portfolio of things that you've been building, or different types of technology you can use. I mentioned IBM Watson, for example. I did a training, and now I know how to use it, and it's just fun. Sometimes a bit complicated, but it's kind of like learning a new language, and finding your way through new skills. And I actually had a lunch with another alumni last week, and she was telling me the same thing. She actually switched to data science, and that's how she did it, starting small by small projects, and then just getting hooked and carrying on with it.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for all the time you dedicated to us with this topic. And also thank you everyone for joining this webinar. We are gonna have another one next Friday, Friday the 6th of March, with the 2 winners of the Alumni of the Year. So make sure to sign up for that as well. And thank you again, Blandine, for all the passion you put in this, and have a wonderful day for you, and the guys have a wonderful evening in Europe.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I hope that was helpful, and you guys are all excited about voice as well now.